Welcome back to my channel. I am Kia Sangria, and today I am here with a new sewing video, which is a revisit of a pattern that I previously made 3 years ago. During that time, I made quite a bit of mistakes when making this, and although I walked away from the entire thing feeling very happy about what I made, I knew that I could do better. I have to say, I am a completely different sewist than I was when I made it, although I am very much thankful for the experiences that I had while making it, especially because I made it during a live stream. So any mistakes that I made, I had no choice but to own it. One of the things that I've learned since making this corset 3 years ago is I learned how to do the bunny ear corset lacing technique. So now I no longer need my husband to help me get in and out of my corsets. This princess can save herself. I also felt like now was a good time to revisit it because we're getting so close to the Halloween season. So if someone asks you what it is that you're going to be for Halloween or what it is that you're going to make for Halloween, you have absolutely no excuse because Kia Sangria gave you ideas. I've talked your ear off enough. Thank you so much for being here. If you are coming back from the videos that I did 3 years ago to watch this one now, please know that I appreciate you so much. And it's great to see you again. So I'm going to be doing view A of Butterick 5935. I'm going to be using some plastic boning, some cording, crepe back satin as my lining, muslin as my interfacing, and some matte green satin from my stash. I'm also going to be using some grommets, and I haven't decided if I'm going to use my handheld punch or my heavy duty puncher. I'm also armed with fray check in case my fabric starts to come undone. Now I hate making bias tape, so I'm going to be using pre-made bias tape for my binding as well as my boning channels. I also have 2 thread colors, a nail file, a tracing tool, and then some carbon paper for marking my fabric. Also, in an effort to preserve this pattern and its sizing, I'm actually going to be tracing the tissue paper instead of cutting into it directly. To start, I iron all my fabrics, my fashion layer, my lining, and then my interfacing. I also decided that I wanted to have this cute embroidery detail, so I'm just tearing away the stabilizer, but check out my previous video to see how I did this. Now view A has a total of 7 pieces, but if you're doing any of the other versions that are offered, your design might have more. Just check the instructions to be sure. So the first step after cutting is to baste the interfacing and fashion fabric layer together. So for me, that will be my green fabric and then the muslin pieces. And I'm going to do this for all of the bodice pieces, putting the lining pieces aside for right now because we will deal with those later. Now for today's project, I'm going to be using my Brother LB500S Star Wars edition, and I'm going to baste my layers together and then move on to attaching the front and middle front pieces together as per the instructions. Now I'm going to attach the side front and then I will get started on the back pieces. Very important to have marked all of your notches and stuff by now, because this is how you're gonna not get confused on which piece goes to which piece. So super, super, super important. Now with these pieces sewn together, right before I stitch the back pieces to the front, I'm just going to press all of the seams and try to get these as flat as possible using some steam. So with the lining pieces, I waited till this step to mark out the holes for my grommets using the carbon paper. And then I proceed to sew up the lining the same way I did the fashion layer. Now my boning doesn't have its own casing, but I can use bias tape for that. So I'm going to position this bias tape over each seam of the lining. Now with the boning, I measure out pieces for each channel that are about 1 inch away from the seam allowance, and then I use my nail file to smooth the edges out so I don't get poked with it later. Now after inserting my boning into each channel, I can combine both the lining and outer layer as one. So with the wrong sides together, I'm just going to stitch all around the edges to make one piece. And because I cannot be trusted to sew this evenly, I used a ton of pins for this step. And even though the video is sped up at this point, I actually did this section really slowly because I did not have the patience to go back and seam rip this if I made any mistakes. Now, if you wanted to, at this step, you could go ahead and make your bias binding yourself, but I love myself too much, and so pre-made double fold bias tape to the rescue. And I'm going to be using this on the center back pieces for the last two boning channels, and then around the top and bottom edges of the bodice as the binding itself. Now with the bodice practically done, it's time for me to add my grommets. I decided to use my heavy grommet press for this. Now I can tell I got so much better at doing this because probably up until I think March of this year, I have finally gotten better at marking these out so I don't end up with like extra grommets at the end, because I've had my moments where on one side there'll just be one extra grommet installed, and once you do that, there's no fixing it. So I'm really proud of myself for doing this evenly this time around. For my lacing, I cut about 280 inches worth of cord. I think that's about 8 yards of cording. Probably too much, but I'd rather it be too long than too short. And to ensure that the edges of the cording don't fray, I took a lighter and then just carefully kind of lit them. But that's a wrap on this video. Thank you guys so much for coming back, and I will see you in my next video. Bye.